The concept of a cinematic universe is something everyone here is familiar with, but for cohesion's sake I'll explain. It's when one movie connects to a different movie. That's literally all it boils down to. Maybe throw in some bad TV shows while you're at it, I don't know. It's a novel idea, really. You create a bunch of different movies with different characters who can carry their own standalone franchises, and you bring them all together to tell an interconnected story. I like it, it's a good idea. Or at least it was. After the Marvel Cinematic Universe ingrained itself into pop culture and proved to be a hit at the box office, there were a lot of people who wanted just a taste of that success for themselves. And fair enough, right? It's not like there's many original ideas in Hollywood these days. But the thing is, disregarding a handful of exceptions, no one really understood how to replicate Marvel's success. What made the MCU such a big deal was not only because it spent a good few years with smaller releases that built up to their first massive crossover movie, and also had a story planned out that they wanted to tell, it worked because it's Marvel. Having a good formula for gradually creating a large fanbase of people who will watch everything you make tends to go hand in hand with owning some of the most iconic characters in fiction. And while there have been box office returns from many of these other attempts at making a cinematic universe, no one has been able to get it down to a science like Marvel has. Hell, not even Marvel themselves these days. It is incredibly easy to fumble a cinematic universe. From the planning stages to the beginning stages, and the trying to maintain your success as the crippling reality of your movies being bad sets in stages. And with even more cinematic universes being announced, Sonic has one now apparently, so that's fun. Oversaturation is beginning to set in, and I think you and I are a bit fatigued by cinematic universes, so let's spend a good while trashing them. This video is sponsored by War Thunder. War Thunder is my favorite way to roleplay someone navigating the YouTube comments section. It's a free-to-play, large-scale multiplayer action game for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, placing you in these incredibly intense and fun PvP battles with more than 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships to choose from, all of which are meticulously detailed down to their individual components, allowing you to customize your military vehicle of choice to give you an extra edge in battle, along with making it look visually distinct. So when you do land a good shot on someone, they'll be so impressed with your devilishly good looks they won't even think about talking trash. Combined with constantly evolving graphics, physics, and sound effects while you participate in dynamic battles in various locations around the globe, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more immersive war atmosphere in a video game. And even if you're one of those people who isn't a huge fan of super serious war simulator games, War Thunder's got you covered with arcade battles for people looking for a faster, more streamlined experience, while still offering the immersive and realistic gameplay in realistic battles and simulator battles. Along with this, the game has recently received a new major update, Alpha Strike, which not only refined the game's visual effects and refined the gameplay based on suggestions from the community, but also adds Hungarian aviation, a ton of new modern and classic equipment, as well as the brand new map North Holland, and there's still plenty of new content to come in the future. So if you're at all interested, download War Thunder today for free by clicking the link in the description. And all new players and those who haven't played War Thunder for half a year or more will receive bonuses, like a premium account for free, 100,000 silver lions, free premium vehicles for free, and everything else on screen. Thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, and thank all of you for helping to support this channel. Should start with the most important point and why most of you clicked on this video. I promise the rest of the video is interesting too. Oversaturation. The main reason why we are all sick and tired of cinematic universes. What made cinematic universes so novel was the simple fact that you were rewarded for watching every installment with the big crossover stuff. Back in the day, specifically when it came to superhero movies, there were plenty of cinematic takes on Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, etc., and they were all their own standalone franchises. You watched them casually like you would any other movie because they were self-contained. Now there are multiple different superhero franchises, far more than previously, with completely different characters and stories that inevitably come together in a big crossover. A big part of the MCU's early appeal was seeing that these superhero movies that were perfectly enjoyable on their own would actually cross over with each other for a larger narrative. It's the main reason why the first Avengers movie blew people's minds back in 2012. Casual moviegoers who didn't know there was an interconnected universe being built were pleasantly surprised to see that these movies were actually building up to something. And it wasn't until the Avengers released that people finally understood what the MCU was, and they thought it was pretty cool. And in fairness, at the time, it was pretty f***ing cool. It hadn't really been done before, at the very least not on this scale, and people quickly flocked to the MCU and began watching every new installment. It was a pretty large commitment considering the majority of people, not me, the majority of people have actual lives and don't watch this stuff for a living, but so long as only a handful of cinematic universes popped up, it was perfectly manageable, especially when you consider that before Phase 3 of the MCU started, there were only like 2 Marvel films a year. Oh, the days where the MCU was actually watchable for normal people, I wish for that to come back. So that's how the trend began. Something that hadn't been done before, executed on a grandiose scale, and making people realize that they would be rewarded for keeping up with the movies as they came out. Then, gradually more cinematic universes would pop up as the years went on. You had DC shoving theirs out the door to compete with Marvel, Godzilla and Kong have theirs now, that shitty Mummy remake starring Tom Cruise was going to have one and it was immediately cancelled. They called it the Dark Universe, so perhaps the writing was on the wall with that one. The Dark Dark Tower was apparently supposed to be the start of a cinematic universe, apparently. I didn't know that. What do you mean the Amazing Spider-Man movies were a cinematic universe that failed? I didn't know that either, but apparently the failing of that cinematic universe was responsible for the rise of Sony's Spider-Man villain cinematic universe, and oh wait, DC just died. Don't worry, they're starting again. Do you see the problem? Not only is the sheer number of cinematic universes that have been started up frankly silly, but the number of failures, either cancelled or still going without much of a pulse, greatly outweigh the success stories, which there is only one of. So let's not get it twisted. Oversaturation is a massive problem with cinematic universes, but it's not the only problem. A lot of other issues stem from this one, like how it's incredibly obvious that all of these cinematic universes have popped up just to try and cash in on Marvel's success without any of the planning, risk-taking, and confidence in a slow build-up that made the MCU a household name. And then there's also the fact that, let's be perfectly honest here, and not counting DC and Godzilla, some of these other universes just aren't recognizable enough to get people interested in following them. The Dark Tower is one of the greatest series of books I've ever read in my life, but general audiences don't have a clue what it is, especially compared to some of Stephen King's more popular novels that have been given film adaptations. Do not pause the video. And while a film adaptation would be a great way of exposing more people to the series, the film itself already taking a ton of liberties with the source material to the point of completely alienating its core fanbase is not especially helpful, specifically when you are trying to make a cinematic universe. Even universes that use established Marvel characters like Sony's villain universe tend to, okay, I'm just gonna show a PNG of Morbius and Madam Web and move on from that example. Then there's the matter of, not understanding what a cinematic universe is. You see, back in my day, a series of sequels and spin-offs involving characters that were from the same franchise was called, well, a franchise. Now it's called a cinematic universe by people who don't know what the term means. The Sonic the Hedgehog Cinematic Universe. Franchise. The word you're looking for is franchise. What made Marvel a cinematic universe was because it consisted of, again, multiple different films starring completely different characters from different Marvel IPs, who can carry their own films and franchises, with stories that are completely divorced from each other until the crossover movies happen. While not true of every MCU installment, you can watch the majority of standalone films and enjoy them without having knowledge of previous or upcoming films. With this Sonic cinematic universe they're doing, they're just making Sonic movies and TV shows. Knuckles is a Sonic character. He is intrinsically linked with Sonic as a franchise. Giving him a spin-off doesn't separate him from being a Sonic character. It doesn't just create a Knuckles the Echidna franchise. Now, if instead of this there were spin-offs involving completely different Sega characters and IPs that link with the Sonic movies, then yes, that would count as a cinematic universe, because they're different IPs and characters. That's what makes cinematic universes cool in the first place. That's what made Marvel so successful. Calling your film franchise a cinematic universe doesn't just make it one. There's no interconnected universe of characters, it's just the same characters in the main series of movies getting spin-offs. That's a franchise. The oversaturation of cinematic universes is not just affecting audiences because there's so many of them being announced, dying ad infinitum, it's also clearly affecting Hollywood because everyone is just chomping at the bit to create their own cinematic universe, to the point where completely normal franchises are being called cinematic universes now. It's insane. There's been a lot of Marvel glazing so far in this video, so here comes the plot twist. I don't like the MCU, at least not anymore, and I don't think that's a controversial opinion to have, at least now in a post-Endgame world. I spent a lot of time fornicating Marvel so I can get everyone up to speed on why the MCU was such a success and why people were on board with it after the Avengers release in 2012. It's a great way to highlight the failings of every other cinematic universe that's tried to copy it, except maybe the Monsterverse. Those guys are just kind of doing their own thing, and it's definitely working out for them. Back on topic. Marvel were on top of the cinematic universe world. I need my fucking thesaurus. But after Endgame, things took a serious turn for the worse. A string of critical and financial failures have put the MCU in a rather tricky spot, and it's not the only problem either. I did talk about this in detail in my video about the multiverse problem, so apologies if this section is a bit repetitive if you've watched that video, but Marvel have not helped themselves at all when it comes to the oversaturation of cinematic universes, because ever since Endgame release they have gone full steam ahead with cranking out content, and to say it's slop is putting it far too nicely. You see, Marvel had a plan and a steady release schedule for over 10 years leading up to the release of Avengers Endgame. After that though, they began the new saga of the MCU, and with the recent release of Disney Plus at the time, they effectively made a deal with the devil. Marvel's biggest problem is that they are constantly producing new content. What makes the MCU so hard to follow now is the sheer quantity of Disney Plus shows that you need to watch in conjunction with the films in order to get a grasp on anything that's happening in the story. Marvel were already pushing their luck a bit with some of their post-Avengers films having references and callbacks and sometimes crossover characters. However, they could still be watched casually without punishing you too harshly for missing missing a film or two because they weren't Avengers movies, they were standalone. Nowadays, if you miss a single Marvel movie or TV show, you're in the dark and won't be able to understand anything. It's way too much content, and it's being produced at an alarmingly fast rate. People watched WandaVision and Loki and Falcon and Winter Soldier when they were released, but everything after that is hazy as shit. There's just so much content to keep track of now, and that would be one thing if the majority of these shows and movies were any good, but it's no secret that the recent output of the MCU has been far from stellar. The quality has dropped off a cliff in favor of quantity, which is never a good sign for any franchise, but it's even worse when you consider how big of a commitment the MCU was for the average moviegoer before they tapped into Disney+. Now it's just straight up impossible for anyone to keep track of what's going on because normal people simply do not have the time. It's the reason why Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was the most successful film they had in a while, because unlike every other IP in this cinematic universe, Guardians was always a self-contained story with characters going on their own arcs with no crossovers with other Marvel properties. The only exception to this was the Guardians being included in Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, where they straight up killed off Gamora, effectively sabotaging the Guardians franchise, and yet even with that handicap in mind, they still managed to tell a story that was self-contained while using this unfortunate consequence of being in the MCU to their advantage. Guardians was the last IP in this universe that people cared about, and when it finally ended, a lot of people checked out, me included. I haven't watched anything MCU related since Guardians 3 because it was the last thing they had that I was invested in and wasn't corrupted by their utterly incompetent business model. There's nothing left to care about in the MCU. It's devolved into crossover and multiverse-obsessed sludge that's stuffing people full of half-baked content that they don't have any interest in, yet they're required to watch it just to understand anything going on. And even though they've slowed their roll recently, the damage has been done and I don't think they're going to be able to fix what they've caused. Complete and utter apathy towards a brand that only 5 years ago was dominating the industry. When you have a movie called Endgame, have it be a conclusion to over 10 years worth of planning and storytelling, and have managed to have it captivate and hold the attention of the entire world, you need to give people a really good reason to stay and watch the next saga of this story, and all Marvel has done is just shovel out more content. All the characters people watched for 10 years are either dead, absent after finishing their journey, or they're a complete shell of who they once were. The MCU as we knew it has been dead for a while, and seeing Kevin Feige and Disney be in complete denial of this fact as they continue to push out more content and contribute to the oversaturation of cinematic universes is just really depressing. While it's sad to watch the only successful cinematic universe crumble to pieces after years of success, I think it's even sadder watching one stumble and fall at basically every single hurdle attempting to replicate that success. All of the failures are guilty of this, but I want to specifically highlight the DCEU because despite how much of a colossal failure it was from start to finish, it somehow lasted a really long time before the plug was finally pulled. DC were trying to jumpstart their own cinematic universe for a while, and Marvel, starting 5 years before them and seeing great success, only put more pressure on them. They started DC EU with Man of Steel in 2013, but it became clear by the time Batman v Superman released that they were really rushing the whole process here. There was no planning involved, no confidence in building their own saga from scratch. They just began immediately pumping out crossover movies despite only having one established character so far. They really wanted the success the MCU had, and while financially the movies were doing pretty good, it wasn't because people were captivated by a cinematic universe that was in the making for years. It was just because the movies featured some of the most popular superheroes of all time doing insane stuff, which is going to attract eyes no matter what. They had gotten the process completely backwards, only realizing their mistake after making the crossover stuff by finally giving these characters their own standalone adventures. This, combined with clashing visions, different directors, clashing tones, and the large abundance of films that were, for lack of a better word, shit, led to a cinematic universe that gradually fell to pieces the longer it went on. I'm someone who greatly prefers the characters and stories of DC over Marvel, and yet I can see plain as day that this entire operation was a complete and utter mess that was doomed from the start. I'm not a filmmaker or a business guy, dodged that bullet long ago, but surely it shouldn't have been that hard to just show some restraint and not be so obviously chasing after Marvel. Sure, they got a head start, but in what world does that mean you have to immediately skip what got them their success just so you can taste a fraction of it? It's so stupid, I don't get it. What possesses you to make movies like this? Long story short, things crashed and burned shortly after Justice League. While Aquaman, for some bizarre f***ing reason, made $1 billion at the box office, the rest of the DCEU's output would either be god-awful and a box office bomb, or it would be actually kinda decent, and also be a box office bomb because no one was invested in this. Also, Dwayne Johnson got heavily involved with the production of Black Adam for some reason and basically urged the producers to give him a standalone movie because he's a massive egomaniac. And hey, what do you know? This one movie along with The Flash killed the DCEU for good. This was the second largest cinematic universe next to Marvel, by the way, so I think you can imagine this also soured a lot of people in cinematic universes, so whoops, I guess. I mean, in conclusion, there's not really much to say. I'm tired of cinematic universes. You all suck at making them, you're never gonna be Marvel, not even Marvel is gonna be Marvel, just stop. Make movies like normal people, call them franchises, you are not the next Kevin Feige. F***ing Sonic Cinematic Universe. Sonic 3 better have Shadow the Hedgehog jump through the screen and blow me off if you have that kind of confidence. F***ing hell. It sucks how oversaturated the market is right now, and out of all of the Hollywood trends I've seen, this is probably one of the worst. It's a creativity sinkhole and a waste of money if you don't have any patience whatsoever. If the industry really is going to be going in this direction for the next few years, then at least have the decency to not spam viewers with content and actually take your time with building an audience. The MonsterVerse is doing that, and while the movies aren't high art or anything, they're clearly having a much better and healthier time than these jokers. The fact we're in an age where a Godzilla and King Kong cinematic universe is a healthier film output and is collecting better box office returns than DC and Marvel is astounding to me. Maybe they'll learn their lesson and take some pointers, or they'll do the usual Hollywood thing and get the wrong idea from it almost immediately. I don't know and I don't care. That's the end of the video. Play Yakuza or something.